Greetings to you. My name is Tara Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this vlog 14, PhDs, Relationships and Families. This vlog was promised to Michael and his wonderful partner Barbara a few weeks back. I promised to Michael that the week that Steve and I moved into our new house, we would prepare a special vlog to address the issue of relationships. And it is so important that we do so. It's an important area, it's an increasingly important area, and yet it is being ignored in the refereed literature. So Steve and I, throughout our academic careers, have realised the importance of understanding and caring for families and relationships. There is no doubt that we saw the impact of divorce and separation on our students. A divorce can either end a candidature or it can certainly slow a candidature down. So we need to address the whole person. You see, Steve and I never separate the professional relationship with our PhD students from the personal relationship. And the reason we don't have that personal professional separation is we supervise the whole person. And a whole person has a family. There are no quant studies in this area. There are very few qualitative studies in this area. So when I was enacting the research for the vlog for you all this week, I had to go to the blogs, and there are literally hundreds of blogs on this topic. Let me give you a flavour of their theme and their tone. Quote, "Dissertation does not mean divorce. How to get married during a PhD. How not to get married during a PhD. Lessons I learnt while working towards my PhD while raising 3 young children. And does academic life mean divorce?" There's also some problematic gender and sexuality blind spots in this research. Gay and lesbian relationships particularly are underrepresented in this literature, and men tend to not write these blogs. Women are discussing their relationships. And in articles such as Strange Bedfellows that was in the journal Salon, it featured quotes like, "The model of the successful female academic crystallised in my mind. She sacrificed her personal life for her work." End of quote. This is going well, isn't it? So, as you can see, so much of the doctoral journey, and particularly doctoral admissions, focuses on the intellectual quality of the candidate. So you have to be really clever and really focused to get in, and that's really important. We need that. But we so rarely explore the personal and social relationships that will encircle that candidate through the candidature. And without that, the candidate will not be successful. So to help you and to help all of us work through these issues, I'm presenting this vlog today, and I hope it helps you, and I hope it helps a lot of people thinking through the nature of the personal and the professional through their PhD. But of course, I'm not conducting this vlog this week alone. As I promised to Michael, I would involve my husband, Professor Steve Redhead. He's downstairs at the moment getting ready, but let me tell you a little bit about him before we join him downstairs. Steve has worked in 7 universities in 4 countries. He's published 16 books, hundreds of refereed articles and book chapters. He is an internationally known social and political commentator, online and offline, and through sound and vision. His interdisciplinary expertise spans law, particularly jurisprudence, critical criminology, sociology, and cultural studies. His best-known books are Rave Off, End of the Century Party, Repetitive Beat Generation, and his landmark texts on 2 of the most important scholars of our time, Paul Virilio and Jean Baudrillard. He is a very experienced, very experienced supervisor and examiner, and has been a head of school, an associate dean research, a sub-dean of graduate studies, and been the director of an array of internationally successful research centres. So yes, we are married, and yes, we supervise together, but we've spent the bulk of our academic careers not married and supervising with other people, so it broadens out our expertise, if you will. Steve also completed his PhD while married and raising children. I completed my PhD while single and without children. And that's part of what I want to make sure we get through today. I want to be really clear that we're dealing with family and friends in a very expansive way today. We have to note that between 1/4 and 1/3 of women in any generation do not have children, so families have to be understood in a very expansive way, including the caring of parents, becoming pregnant during a candidature, but also maintaining your friendships, which is so important to a successful PhD. And we particularly want to talk about the challenges, gay or straight, of maintaining a relationship. A doctorate is really hard. Maintaining a successful relationship is really hard. Making them both work, that's even more complex. And in fact, Shalini, in one of those blogs I read for this week, described getting married during her PhD as, quote, like stepping into two boats at the same time, end of quote. But we are today dealing with real life, crunchy life. We're dealing with the real challenges that confront us all every single day. And I also want to log that for the Australian universities that publicise this data, the average age of an Australian PhD student in these institutions is 36 years of age. So the notion that a young 21 or 22-year-old student is our candidate is simply wrong. These are 36-year-old people with lives, with families, with friends, with relationships. I also want to log that about 10% of the conversations that I have with students in my office are about relationships and how to keep the relationship and the context around the doctorate working successfully. So this is a major issue, and as I always do in these vlogs, I will not shirk that major issue. We're going to discuss it today. So let's go downstairs and join Steve. Hi again, everyone, and hi, Steve.
Hi, Tara.
This is fun to be talking to you, and I talked about you upstairs, and you can only find out later what I said about you.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Steve Redhead, my wonderful husband. And Steve, the first question I want to ask you in our new home is, why do you think the issues of relationships and family and friends is so underrepresented in the research on doctoral education?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I must admit I was really surprised when I started thinking about it that I've never read any of the literature in this area, because basically there isn't very much.
No.
And I've completed 33 PhD students around the world, and I've had lots of experience of these sorts of issues, but I've never gone into them in a kind of academic way, and I would have found earlier that there was very little literature. I think one of the real problems based around PhD completions particularly, but supervision generally, and relationships, is that the old Oxbridge model, and we're still with that in a lot of ways, is that you've got the lone male PhD student. And in the sexist times of the past, whatever the family of that lone male was just expected to support and to promote the lone male PhD. So I think there really is something there. It'd be surprising if there was any literature on that, but I do think that's a fundamental trope.
Yeah, just like the Oxbridge tutorial is still with us in every tutorial at a university. That notion of the lone male scholar, the Cardinal Newman version of the scholar,
it's medieval,
is still with us. I think that's a great point, and so we're still continuing those assumptions. So therefore, what strategies do you think we can enact as supervisors, but also as people involved in the management of doctoral education like myself? What can we do to think about how to share the doctoral experience with partners, with kids, with family and friends? Can this doctoral experience be shared?
I think it can, and I think the absence in the literature has actually got to be repaired as a theoreticist rather than empiricist. I think we don't just rely on our experiences, and obviously today we're going to be talking about our experiences in many ways, but that's not what should structure the sharing. I think we do need to repair the absence in the literature, but in a way which actually allows the experiences to come through, because it's clear from your role at Flinders, for example, and my role in previous universities, there is a real need for work and for strategy around this area. There's no doubt about it. It's something that's coming to the fore in the supervision and indeed the examination of PhD students.
Yeah, and we have all those exit surveys when students either finish or don't finish a PhD, and I'm not sure we've asked overt questions about family and family support in terms of either the completion successfully or otherwise of a doctorate.
No, I don't think we have. I haven't.
No, and so therefore we actually really don't have data. We have, as we talked about upstairs with my wonderful students, the blogs that are available.
Yes,
and that can be
that's
triangulated through unobtrusive research methods. We
Yes.
can try and work out through individual experience what is happening.
Yes.
But we do need strategies for this.
Yes, we do.
And if I can give you one example, I have a wonderful female student at Flinders who has established a contract with her parents, her partner and her kids to make sure that she produces an hour of writing on her PhD every single day. And her kids actually wrote the contract, explained their role in that contract and how they were going to hold their mother accountable to completing that hour every single day. So that's a fantastic strategy. But how important is it to involve the kids and the parents in this discussion, in these strategies?
I mean, that's fascinating that, contract and contract of employment law is so important to our current economic and social conditions that we actually flip it back into higher education. And yeah, I think it is important to involve as many parts of the family or relationships as possible. I think that's part of the key. And I mean, in some ways we've done that in our own structure, both for supervision but also for our academic work. And I think that is important. People need those sorts of strategies and good practice. I mean, I know we may be sceptical about contracts like that, contract inverted commas, but maybe that's a start.
And it was overt too, so that the children started to understand what mum is doing in the office when she's writing. She's not sitting there, going through Twitter, she is writing. So the overt explanation of what is involved in a doctorate, I think, is making a real difference.
Yes, and that's really what's not happened in the past, partly because of the lone male thing, that people haven't really talked about what it's like to be a PhD student. And that's what we're uncovering.
Yeah.
Part of the relationship stuff is to do with that, actually talking more, expressing more about what it's really like to be a PhD student.
The shape, the texture, the filament of what's involved in this discussion, I think, is really important.
And that's, I mean, the contract thing, I'm still sceptical about that. It's a practical way of doing it.
Yeah, and then the children and the parents and the partner understand the shape of the day.
Yeah. And
I think that is really important.
Yeah.
A lot of the problems that I'm seeing in the office when students come in is a discussion about relationships, particularly when a relationship existed before an enrolment in a PhD, then the PhD happened, and then problems have emerged in the relationship since the PhD started. And indeed, the blogs I've been reading for this reinforce this problem. So we used to call this, like a woman finishes a PhD and she gets a divorce. It's so common that gets a PhD, gets a divorce, that it's mentioned in just about every single blog. And we used to call that in undergraduate years, of course, the educating retail effect.
Yeah.
But interestingly, in my office, it's mainly men who are talking about their dissatisfaction in their relationship through the PhD process. So the question I sort of have at this point, in sort of a very negative way, is this dissatisfaction, is this dissonance inevitable? So are the relationship problems simply part of doing something as tough as a PhD?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my argument would be, as it's always been, that something about the PhD, however you do it, PhD by publication or private publication or traditional PhD
creative works
or whatever it is, There is something about the PhD which it's an elite qualification. It's hard, and it's very, very hard, and very, very lonely at times. So maybe you can't eradicate completely that disconnect.
Yeah.
I'm sceptical about being able to eradicate it completely. That doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be talking about these things and helping students as much as we possibly can. And it's simply by talking about these things, something that's not really being referred to in academic literature, is going to start us off. But maybe in the end, you're always coming back to how difficult it is. And that's why it's worth getting as a qualification.
And it's interesting, even in this conversation we had, I thought you would be much more overt and comfortable with the sort of sharing of the experience. But I'm almost getting from you, you're reticent to say how much that experience can actually be shared.
Yes, I think we should try it. I think we should try to open this up. But in the end, I do think it's a lonely road. Yeah.
I do, and one bit of these vlogs that I've loved so much, as you know, because we've had this great feedback where people sit down with their partner, sit down with their kids or their grandchildren and watch these vlogs, and this maybe is a way to start the conversation as well.
And I think in some ways it reflects social conditions, actually. The idea of a communal or collective support for people, whether that's in a family or a group of people living in a home or whatever it is. We've been so individualistic in our society for so long, and the idea of a PhD is an individual thing. It's actually very interesting socially that we've got kind of collective support and support mechanisms and strategies, which is something we're losing in society generally.
I agree, and you've provided a great move into my next question when you've talked about that individual nature of it. The PhD is an individual achieving at the highest levels of scholarship that a university can provide. It's hyper-individualised, which can of course create profound selfishness as well.
Yes.
And indeed, I've always argued resentment is quite a strong emotion in doctoral education. And so is blame.
Yes.
It's very easy to blame other people through a PhD process, whether it be your supervisor, your parents, your kids, your spouse. And it's very easy to sort of displace the disappointments and the failures onto other people. So how important do you think is separating out the family time and the thesis time? Is that a good model? So this is the time I spend with my family, this is the time I spend on my thesis. So therefore, is time management a way to manage the blame and the resentment and get that away from family members?
Yes, I think it certainly is one way of doing it. And again, I don't think you can eradicate the blame, the displacement and anger and frustration and so on, stress. I think all of those things are actually inbuilt into something as long a road as this. You're talking 3 years plus. It's a full-time PhD, and the stress on you is enormous. And I think we have to keep saying that. And therefore, if you can manage it in a way which relates to your family and to your partner and so on, in a way that does manage time better, again, you're going to come up against these things, but that's a way of doing it, yes. So try it pragmatically. I think that is a good way of starting and see how you go. Also, I remember one of your fantastic students was a transgender student. In fact, I think we've worked out it's the first transgender PhD student on the world you supervised. And I'm only raising that now because the partner of that person suffered enormously through the abuse and the ridicule. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? Oh, terrible. Because this was a person who was well known politically in the geographical area, and they had excrement put through their door, absolutely appalling treatment because of who this person was, if you like, politically and socially. But actually that affected the PhD and the finishing of the PhD too, inevitably. And they really they were a really tough family. They developed strategies, the sort of things we're talking about, on a daily basis. And it worked, and they got through, and the PhD got through, and it was a major thing. It actually had an appendix, which was a draft bill on transgender, which actually got partly put into law in England and Wales. So I think the strategies that they developed as a family worked and were really important. But I mean, what they suffered was extreme, but it's an example of the sort of things that people have to go through.
And pretending that the spouses aren't there, that you're sort of the single
Absolutely.
male going along, that's not even an option in cases like that.
No, it isn't. No.
Really powerful. I often think the two great challenges of doctoral education are time and money. And Steve, one of the reasons that you and I focus so strongly and we work our students so hard to finish the PhD in 3 years is because by making that the goal, it's a way to control time and also mitigate the problems of money through a PhD. So it also means if we say right at the start a PhD is 3 years, then the family can plan for a post-PhD future as well. I often think about what it would be like to be the spouse of someone enrolled in a PhD for 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
And that's very common.
Yeah, and your whole of life would seem like it's on hold, really.
Yeah.
So how important is it for the individual and the entire family making that commitment to complete a quick PhD?
Yeah, I think time management in that sense is really important. You've got to be able to explain to people around you what this is, and many of the people in those partnerships are not going to have either PhD or higher education experience themselves. So you've got to explain what this timeline is going to be, and simply saying sometime in the future I'm going to finish isn't good enough. But I do think that's very, very common. People do PhDs, they very often do them full-time and then finish them part-time. I actually did that.
I did that.
A lot of people do it now, and I think that's going to be a model for the future. So some kind of time limit is going to be important, whatever that is. And my argument too would be that you should see it in terms of a full-time 3-year PhD and maybe 5 years part-time or whatever. But you don't want it to spin off into the future, and that's I think when many of the problems that we're talking about relationships really start.
Yeah.
Because you can manage for a short time, 3 years or whatever. But
Yeah.
when it's 7 or 9 or whatever, then people say, what is going on, basically?
What is going on, and how much of my life and the family's life are going to be sacrificed
very long,
for this PhD. Now, this has been quite a negative conversation. We've talked a lot about the disasters of relationships and the problems of the relationships during a PhD, but what sort of strengths for a relationship exists in relationships like ours, for example, where the relationships are based on ideas and knowledge and scholarship? What are the great benefits of a relationship like this, do you think?
I think that is actually what you should be aiming for. I mean, we certainly try and do it in terms of academic work and supervision, and we've supervised other people individually, but we've also supervised people together. And I think the strength of it is actually sharing those problems in your own family and relationships, but also you're more aware then of what is going to happen to the other to the students.
Yes.
And their diverse backgrounds. And as I say, one of the reasons why I was surprised in some ways that it wasn't academic literature is that this has been almost swept under the carpet. I mean, we've had to talk about it ourselves because that's been our experience for 15 years or whatever. But actually, supervising people and their relationships, which is really what we're talking about, has not been on the horizon.
No.
It really hasn't. And maybe it's a matter of looking at how best to strengthen your own relationships and partnerships and families, and then putting that back into PhD supervision.
Look, I agree, and I think one of the reasons we have been very successful supervisors is particularly in the last decade of our lives, we've made a clear decision to supervise the entire family.
We have.
So we meet the spouses, we meet the kids, we're involved in the kids' lives as well, and so therefore they know at any point they can talk to us, and if there's any questions they can always ask us, and I think that's made a difference.
Yeah, it has. It humanises in a way what is almost a dehumanised relationship. I think that's really important, and maybe there are problems with that, but I would emphasise that. I'd err on that side of the equation. I really would. If people are trying to supervise people and their relationships.
Yeah, because I hope we've always come to these situations with kindness
Yeah.
and integrity and love and support.
Yeah. They're the key.
And we get the students through because of that. We get you guys through because of that. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. And Michael, remember the wonderful Michael from
Yes.
Alice? Michael, we wish you well. We've paid our debt. And can I just make a point, Michael? I look forward to seeing you and your partner, Barbara, at the graduations this year. This year, Michael. Michael, Barbara, you're wonderful. So, as always, I wish you a wonderful week. Thanks again, Steve. I wish you love. I wish you light. I wish you peace. T and S out.